All right, feeling better? Okay, good. All right, so my name is Tonya Wallach. I have been at U.S. Soccer for about 6 months. And I have, you could probably read all about me, like we talked about earlier, if you wanted to, in here, right? Along with all of the other illustrious folks who've been speaking today. But I think that only tells you part of the story, right? It tells you what the output of all the things that I've done is, right? So this is the output, or this is the, like, on the surface, kind of who I am and what I've done. So I grew up in Western Michigan. My dad was a Marine, and he was a bartender. He owned his own bar. And so I pretty much grew up on Sundays going to the bar with my family, my 2 brothers, my mom and dad. We cleaned the carpets, we played video games and pool, we beat each other in darts, and that's where I grew up. And so college for me felt a really long ways off, right? And it felt like it was going to be a really expensive proposition. And when I was 6, somebody told me that I had gotten a hat from the local Shell station. My dad, when you went and filled up your car, you could get either a Michigan or Michigan State or Notre Dame hat. And so my dad got 3. And I got the Notre Dame hat, my middle brother got the Michigan State hat, and my youngest brother got the Michigan hat. And we all grew up rabid fans of the free hats we got from the Shell station. And when I was 6, I would wear that everywhere. And I had an uncle who told me, to get into you're never going to get into Notre Dame because you're a girl and it's way too hard. And I spent the rest of my life proving him wrong, right? So I got into Notre Dame, but that's the only part of the story we'll talk about in a minute. I ended up going to Michigan, and I got my graduate degree at Northwestern. I have a beautiful family. My daughter Katie is here. Katie, wave. She's a senior in high school. I have a 9-year-old Johnny, and that's Charlie. He's my 5-year-old. And that's my husband, David. I've had 4 careers. I started off in consulting at a company called Arthur Andersen. I then went from there to academia, to the University of Chicago, and worked with MBAs on their leadership and interpersonal skills. I then went from there to Kraft Foods and did big culture change and talent management, stuff that probably makes, just the words make no sense, right? And then went to Abbott and got to a point where I was really ready for a new challenge, and so I came to soccer. I volunteer for causes like autism and for an organization called ISEC, and then these are the things I like to do in my spare time. I am really an introvert at heart, and there was a great philosopher who once said, if you have a library and a garden, you'll have everything you need. And that's kind of how I feel about life. So that's me, but it really doesn't tell you the full story, does it? It tells you all the outputs and what I like to do on a daily basis. I think this is kind of what tells you about really who I am and what my journey has been, right? And the yellow dots, this is time. So if you do the math, I'm 42. All the stuff above the line are really good things and positive memories. And the things below the line over time are the things that really sent me for a loop or sent me thinking or were points of change in my life, right? So let's start at the beginning. So I'm born, right? When I was in 3rd grade, I got the lead in the school play, and I got to play Little Miss Bell. And it was awesome, and I was so great in a theater of my own mind. But Jeannie Summers on the playground after school one day told me that I wasn't good, and that I sang funny, and I never sang again. I know, it's really sad. You've all had experiences like this, right? But it was one of those things that really, that was my first experience with adversity, right? Middle school was tough for me. I grew up, unlike you guys, at a time where leadership, like women being bossy wasn't considered leadership. It was just considered bossy. And so I was bullied pretty badly in 6th and 7th grade and even into high school. And that was a tough time. In 7th grade, though, I got to use my intellectual prowess. I won the 7th grade school spelling bee. That was awesome. I won it on the word blatherskite, which means stupid or dumb person. I bet you didn't know that. I went to high school. It was okay. It was okay. Ups and downs, but mostly okay. And that whole time I was there, I was really focused on getting into Notre Dame, like I talked about, right? And I knew that as the daughter of a bartender with 2 parents who hadn't gone to college, that I was going to have to pay for this myself. So I needed to not only get in with good grades, I needed to have scholarships, and I needed to find a way to get financial aid, right? So I gunned it. I spent all my time in every student organization I could be part of. I had a 4.0 going into my senior year, and I wanted to walk out being valedictorian with the most land grants and opportunities I could get, right? And then I took pre-calc. Yeah, and I got an A-. And I got my 4-point. I lost out on being valedictorian by 0.3 of a point. Sucked. But that was a real low point for me. Like that was the most failure I had ever endured in my life at that point, right? And so I got into Notre Dame, but I couldn't afford to go there. And so the best choice for me was an in-state school called Michigan. I had not considered Michigan, but my dad had asked me to fill out the application because he knew it would be a better solution financially. So I filled out the application, I got in, and I just kind of sat on it. And then when it became clear I couldn't pay for Notre Dame, I said, okay, I'm going to go to Michigan. And for the first quarter, I spent a lot of time drinking beer. A lot of time. And then I got my grades at the end of the first semester. And knowing I would have to pay for it myself, I said, wow, that's not who I am, right? That's not who I am. I really need to button this thing up and make the right investments to set myself up for a career. So then I did better. I got involved in some academic institutions at Michigan and really fell in love with the place. So much so that at 2 o'clock I'm going to run out of here and go to Madison Square Garden and watch them play basketball against Michigan State. Is that all right if I just head out at like 2:01? Okay. I got a great job in Chicago. Let's talk about your question earlier though. I had done an internship at Arthur Andersen Consulting because consulting is what you do when you don't know what you want to do, right? So I had gotten this internship, and it was the job was in New York City, and a lot of my friends were here. But I grew up in Western Michigan, and it felt really far away from home. So I called them and was like, I'm not sure I want to be in New York. I like it, but could you move the offer to Chicago? And they're like, it's your choice, Tonya. You pick. For months, I agonized. Analysis paralysis. Do I go to New York? Do I go to Chicago? It felt like the biggest decision of my life at the time. And I would play Frank Sinatra's like New York, New York, and My Kind of Town, and my roommates really couldn't stand it for a while, right? And so there was one day where one of my roommates was like, just pick. I said, okay. And I picked up a quarter, and I said, heads New York, tails Chicago. And it came up heads New York. Guess what I did? I said, okay, let's do this, best 2 out of 3. And that's what I knew, right? And it was a lesson for me. I keep that quarter in my Frank Sinatra CD at home because every time I come up into a place where I'm analyzing it too much, I go back to the fact that we always know in our hearts what we want to do, right? And that any road, not any road will get us there, but most roads will get us somewhere that will teach us something, right? So, there you go. So it came up heads New York, and I went to Chicago. And I loved it. I had a great time. I lived with fun roommates. I traveled the United States. I got to work for the government. I got to work for a startup. And after about 2 years of not sleeping in my own bed, I got to this place where I felt like really complacent. I was about 24, and I went, this is a great career. I don't really know that this is what I want to do long term. And they kept telling me, you're going to be a partner by the time you're 30, Tonya. You're great. And in my heart, I wasn't feeling it. And so I got a chance to go out to, and I said yes to a chance to go out to our development place and teach folks like you, new people in the workplace, how to be good consultants. And I fell in love with the science of learning and teaching. And I was telling a friend of mine at Arthur Andersen about it, and he's like, my wife is at the University of Chicago getting her MBA. You should have a conversation with her. So I had a conversation with his wife, and she said, you know what, we're going through this massive culture change. You could really use your consulting skills and progress your interest in leadership and learning and development if you talk to this other lady. So I talked to the other lady who at lunch pulled out a Hello Kitty wallet, and I said, I have to work for her, right? Because who doesn't love that? So I was like, whatever you want me to do, whatever you want me to pay me, I will do this because I love Hello Kitty too. So we did it, and I thought I'd be there for a couple of years, and I was there for 9. I got the chance to do instructional design, do executive coaching, do learning and leadership development. I got a chance to design programs, to build systems. I got a chance to teach. I got a chance to do big consulting projects with companies that would come to the University of Chicago and ask for our help, all because they said yes, right? About 2006, I got to a place where I was like, yeah, I'm ready for the next challenge. And I went out and started interviewing with big companies. And they said, Tonya, you're never going to get in if you don't have a graduate degree. And I was like, oh. And it became really clear that that was not going to happen if I didn't have a master's degree. So I had gotten married in the meantime, met the love of my life, David. And we had a great wedding. Katie was 5 at that time. I didn't think I was going to have kids until about here. And I met David, and Katie was 2.5, and she was part of the package, and I fell in love with her too. And as part of that, it just felt like a really cool opportunity to think differently about how my life would play out, right? So I get to the point where I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this. And so I go to graduate school. And I'm going to graduate school part-time. I'm working at the University of Chicago during the daytime. I'm trying to see my family at nighttime. And right around 2008, when I was thinking about graduating from graduate school, I was almost 33, and the clock was ticking, right? If we wanted to have kids, it was like now or never. And I looked at my husband, and he's like, okay, let's try. And it was like instant, right? And 9 months later, Johnny was born. But first, it was Friday night. I went to class. Or it was my last day of work, and I went to class. Over the weekend came Monday. It was I had a final on a Monday night. I woke up Tuesday morning. I had a C-section. I stayed in the hospital for 4 days, and my best friend dropped me off on a Friday night to go back to class, and then my husband picked me up, right? So that's the kind of crazy you have to do to make things work sometimes. You just do. When my son was born in the hospital, he had something wrong with his arm. They didn't know what was wrong. It was the first time in 60 years that a baby had been born via C-section with a broken arm. They had trouble getting him out. And they didn't know what it was at first, and they did surgery on him 3 days after he was born. And as a new mom, that was really heart-wrenching, right? He spent 40 weeks of OT and PT, and that was just, it was tough, right? It was emotional. I didn't realize how much I was going to love this little person who came out of me. I had no concept, and neither will you, right? It's hard to conceptualize now. It's amazing. So that was a low point. I got to the point, too, where I wanted to spend more time with him, and I was putting all of this emotional energy into these students who I loved. But I got to the point where one of them walked in after spring break one time and said to me, my boyfriend broke up with me. And I was like, so dump him. Like I had no empathy, right? Where I might have been pulling out the tissues, giving hugs before, I found I had no emotional empathy because all of it was going to this little person at home. And I said, it's time for a career change. So I called up a bunch of friends, and one of them happened to know a lady at Kraft, which was a mile away from my house. And I thought, I'm not really into mac and cheese, but this could be a really cool opportunity. So I called her, we had lunch. It seemed to be a good fit, and I made the jump. And my commute went from an hour each way and a really emotional job to one that was literally I could walk to in 12 minutes. That was pretty awesome. And I gave up a lot for that, but I made more money, I had a great commute, and I could see my son more, which is really cool. So I spent a lot of cool opportunities at Kraft, and I learned a lot. I saw them through the acquisition of Cadbury and the integration of Cadbury. You know, those eggs, it's pretty cool. We bought that whole thing globally. I got to travel the world and teach people about management and leadership skills. And at the point that we were breaking off the organization, I had invested so much of myself in the different processes and demonstrating my skills and abilities that they asked me to follow the North American version and create something called Kraft University. They'd never had a corporate university before. I'd never created one, but I said yes. So right about that time, I got pregnant. I was told I was going to have a promotion. And my husband, that March, he got in a really bad accident. And he was disabled for 3 years. He had 3 surgeries. He had a back surgery, a knee surgery, and an ankle surgery. And it was a really hard time for our family. So if you can imagine, it was March that I was pregnant in February. March, he was in the accident. In July, he had ankle surgery. We moved 10 days before my son was born. My son was born, and then 2 months later, he had back surgery. So it was a really hard time, right? Because life sometimes just comes at you full throttle. My youngest son didn't sleep very well. So when I went back to work, I had tremendous sleep postpartum. I wasn't sleeping at all. He would get up 5 times a night, and I would get up to feed him, and I would get up in the morning to go do this big job, and I would come home exhausted, and we would go through it all again. So that was a really, really hard time. Then, about a year into that, right about the time that we had learned that Charlie was having some sleep delays, or speech delays, so he was 13 months at the time, Kraft got sold to a private equity firm, and I found out I was going to have to exit 2,500 of my colleagues after this company that I'd helped build. So we found that out in March. I started looking for a new job in May. In July, we found out Charlie was autistic. That next day, I had interviews with Abbott, which would be my next employer. And 3 weeks later, I left Kraft and joined Abbott. Right? So that was a real low time for me. It was a really emotional time, and I was making decisions mostly out of necessity and not really from a place of authenticity. Right? So I walk into Abbott, and the first day that I meet my new boss, I go, holy shit. By the end of the first week, I had shingles. Do you know what that is? It's like an elevated version of chickenpox that adults get when they're really stressed out. And it was a combination of my husband's accident. It was a combination of being in a job I knew I wouldn't like. It was a combination of my boss being batshit crazy. And it all just kind of came to a head right about 2016. And I was lucky because I had the opportunity to walk away. And I chose to. I literally, 11 months into the job, walked out the door and never went back. I know. I was really lucky. And so I spent a while, I'm lucky to have a husband who works, and so I spent a while with the kids trying to pick up the pieces and doing a lot of thinking about what I wanted to do next. And I wanted to share a little bit of that with you today, because I think it's important to realize that we don't all have straight paths. It's not all easy, and there is shit that's going to come your way that is going to send you reeling. So I love the fact that you're all thinking big and that you're all focused on goals. And I think you should keep those in front of you at all times, and I also want you to be flexible, because you don't know how you're going to feel. You don't know what life is going to find for you. And if I'm any example, you know, I think it all turns out for the best in the end. And if you can take those experiences that you have and continue to let them inform who you are and the path you're on, you're going to be awesome. Any questions about this? It took way longer than I thought I was going to. Yeah?
It's kind of like not related, but your son, my brother has autism. He's like autism.
He is high functioning, so he has a social and a communication delay. But he can speak, he's verbal, so we're really lucky. But that was a journey. Huh? He never shuts up. That's true. Now he's loud. He's really loud. We call him Little Loud. Yeah. What kind does your brother have?
He's like that, but he can't really like communicate well, but he's like really good with like computers and stuff. So
Yeah.
And like knows like music and like memorize anything. It's crazy. But
Yes.
can't really communicate well.
Yeah, it's hard, right? That's the biggest obstacle. Cool. All right, you guys ready for a pop quiz? Okay. Success is the fact of getting or achieving wealth, respect, or fame. True or false? Why? Huh? You define your own success. Other thoughts? If that's all you have, the rest of your life is empty. Other thoughts? You should be happy. Okay. Cool. More quizzes. Every male Supreme Court justice has a family. True or false? Huh? False? It's true. Huh? Every one of those guys has a family. True or false? Every female Supreme Court justice has a family. True or false? Hear it? True? False. Only Ruth Bader Ginsburg has a family. Sotomayor and Kagan do not. And RBG, the notorious RBG, right? She didn't start her justice, her legal career, her judge career until her youngest child was out of the house. Her becoming a judge. She didn't become a judge until her youngest child had already left for college. Fascinating, huh? All right, what do these women have in common? Do you guys know who these women are? So Susan Rice, you probably know who she was, former National Security Advisor. Elizabeth Sherwood Randall, former U.S. Deputy Secretary of Energy. Michelle Gavin, President and Senior Director for Africa. And Nancy Minda-Parlow, former Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. Were they A, all Rhodes Scholars, B, all moms, or C, genuine superwomen, or D, all of the above? They were D, all of the above. That is pretty, I mean, that's amazing, right? How often do you think that happens? That women are able to do all of that, right? So here's a quote from Sheryl Sandberg that you guys know who she is, right? The Chief Operating Officer from Facebook, from her book, Lean In. Women are making it to the top. 190 heads of state, 9 are women. Of all the people in parliament in the world, 13% are women. In the corporate sector, the share of women at the top C-level job board seats tops out at 15 or 16%. We like those statistics, we don't like those statistics. We don't like those statistics. All right, what are we going to do about it? Start working? Step up? What does that mean? What does that mean? Huh? Bring in the girl power. I need actionable tactics. What are we going to do? We're going to what? Work on the pipeline. What does that mean, Janae? So Janae says we're going to build up the pipeline. We're going to give younger people the tools and resources and skills to help them grow. What tools, resources, and skills do they need? They need experience. They need leadership qualities, opportunities. What else do they need? Yeah.
To get over any fears that they might have of applying for a position that may lead to one of those 15 or 16%.
Okay, they need to get over their own fears, so some of it's on me. Yep. What else? Anything else? Huh?
Mentors.
They need mentors. Okay. Well, here's the stuff that gets in the way. In addition to all the stuff you just brought up, right? There are some realities of the environments that we live in, our personal and individual environments, but also of the macro environment, right? There are just some realities. We are all women, and we have biological clocks. At some point, we cannot have children, right? If that's something we want to do. We live in the United States. There's a great article, if you have not read it, by Anne Marie Slaughter, who's the head, is the dean of Princeton's public school policy. You should read it. It's called Why You Can't Have It All. And she does a brilliant job of articulating the difference between breadwinning and caregiving in our society. And how breadwinning, meaning she or he who has the most money when they die wins, right? Is more important in our society culturally right now than caregiving, which is taking care of our kids and our families. Uh-oh, we lost it. There it goes. So that is something that you will feel, and you will feel that tension throughout your life. And it's incumbent on us to start to change that, right? Some careers are fundamentally incompatible with being engaged in a family. What kinds of careers might fundamentally be incompatible with being engaged with a family? Anything where you have to travel a lot? A pilot. Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah? What else? Military. Yep. And so those are things you have to start thinking about, like as you inform your own career and what do you want, right? Because some of those things are incongruous. You can't match them up. Here's one. School schedules do not match work schedules. They don't. Unless we change them, which we could. That's going to take all of us together. You may choose a supportive mate. That may be a necessary condition to help you establish your life if you want to have a family, but it's not sufficient because you'll find that a lot of the mental load, you may have heard that word, ends up on you as a woman. There is no right sequence of career and family to ensure you have it all. For those of you who do want kids, it's not an easy calculation. And it's a hard calculation because there are so many unknowns, right? The wisdom used to be have kids early, so you would be like 43 or 45 by the time your kids left the house. And I think the wisdom is changing to if you want to have kids, wait until your early 30s, maybe mid-30s, right? Which seems to be the trend. But there are risks with that, especially biological ones. Because as you wait longer to have kids, it could be harder to have them. So there are trade-offs and lots of things to think about. And the last one, you know, there are 365 days, 7 days in a week, and 24 hours in a day. There are constraints, but it doesn't mean that things can't be done. I think the big question for all of us will be, how do we sequence these things over time? How do we think about them? How do we remain flexible and persistent? And how do we know that remain in the space of knowing we can achieve success, but it's going to be our own definition of what that looks like. And there are going to be trade-offs along the way. So Anne Marie says in the article, I'm all for encouraging women to reach for the stars, but I fear the obstacles that keeping women from reaching the top are more prosaic than the scope of their ambition. Meaning that you're all ambitious, you all probably have a plan. There will be things, both culturally, environmentally, physically, that may intervene in your journey to take you off course. And maintaining flexible enough to deal with those will be really important over time. Okay, so these are some great definitions of success that I found for you guys. You can pass these out down the row. This is where I want to start. Let's see. I can pass these up. And you can look at these a little later. But there's some ones that I really like for a variety of reasons. I like how Arianna Huffington talks about it's about well-being, wisdom, wonder, and giving. I like Richard Branson's about being engaged. Staying engaged in the life that you're in is what success is all about. Deepak Chopra progressive. I love that word. It is a progressive, it's not at one point in time, but it is a progressive, lifelong pursuit. Maya Angelou, liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. Wow. If we could all be so lucky, right? So there's no easy formula to get from here to there. You start out with these grand plans, and I think the idea is to continually iterate your plans over time. And this model, I hope, will give you an idea of how you might be able to do that. And it's how the best designers do their work, right? So they start something, they initiate it, they do research, they do some strategizing, exploration, then they do something, they learn from it, they refine, and they start again. And so it's a continuous loop and wheel. All right, so let's start with initiate. Who knows anything about Tiger Woods? Kind of. What does he do? Golf. Let's just go with the sports side of him, yeah. I used to tell this story, and I didn't tell it for a long time because of his personal issues, but we'll go back to it, right? So those of you who may know who Tiger Woods is, he's a world-famous golfer, and he's won lots and lots of PGA championships, probably one of the best in the world. In 1997, at the age of 21, Tiger won what championship? April 1997. The Masters. He won the Masters and kind of came out of nowhere and was like, woo, he won. Gets his green jacket, puts it on, goes home and watches videotape of his performance and is like, holy shit, that was terrible. Look at that swing. It was not consistent. Every time I swung the golf club, that was all luck. That was not skill, that was luck, right? And so he calls up a guy, Butch Harmon, who's a swing doctor, and he says, Butch, come help me. And Butch helps him break down his swing, step by step, to the point where Tiger Woods can literally almost not even hit the ball because he doesn't know how to, he's gripping it differently, he's using his elbow differently, he's swinging it back at a different angle, and he's having a really hard time. He looks like a novice golfer. And for the next 18 months, he kind of disappears from all golf circles. And everyone's like, where is he? And then all of a sudden in August of 1999, he sort of makes this comeback and ends up back as the #1 golfer. And it's because he spent 18 months, literally, after looking at his swing and saying, this is not consistent, having the idea that I need to do things differently, and doing the work to get to be #1 again. That's what I want you to think about in that initiate stage. Every time you look at your life and you think about, this isn't working, to take a step back and say, I need to reevaluate. And to get the tools and resources you need from your friends, your family, a book, a website, wherever it is, to be able to reevaluate and set a new plan and a new course. Okay? And then we've got the Nike thing up there because we're at Nike. So, all right, so research. The research tells us that self-awareness is one of the most critical elements to being a good human being and being a great leader. The more you know yourself, the better you will be able to make the right choices at the right times. And this is what the research says, that people who know themselves and how others see them are happier, they make smarter decisions, they have better relationships, they raise more mature children, they're smarter, they're superior students, they're more creative and confident, and they are better performers who get more promotions and are more effective leaders. Who wants some self-awareness? Me too. Good. So here are the kinds of things I'd love for you to think about. The wisdom of your own data. Keeping a journal where you can look back and analyze patterns in your life. Getting up every morning and for 10 minutes just writing down anything that comes to mind. The greatest artists, this is an artistic technique, take 10 minutes in the morning, they write everything off their head either at night or in the morning and get it all off their head. And then they go back once a week and they look at everything they've written and they say, what are the patterns here? What is this telling me? How can I use this in the service of making my life better? Keep a journal. It's one of the best things you can do for yourselves. Practice that self-reflection. Put aside time every week to analyze that data, to sit down and check in with yourself and say, how am I doing? What am I doing? Is it serving me? Is it not serving me? But it has to be an intentional practice. Take assessments. You're going to have a lot of opportunities through college and beyond in your new jobs to take assessments. Myers-Briggs type indicator, the Hogan assessment, you name it. Your churches and communities will have assessments. Take advantage anytime you get an opportunity to take a personality or a career assessment to give you feedback and a different lens on what it is, who it is that you are and how you operate in the world. And lastly, ask for feedback. Always and to everyone. to your partner, to your friends, to your mom, to your dad. One of the questions I always ask in interviews is, what would your parents say about you? Like, what would they tell me is your greatest weakness? And if people don't know, it's a problem. Because it shows up everywhere. Our greatest areas for development show up everywhere in different ways, but they're there for us to recognize and take ownership for. All right, so part of that is just creating a working hypothesis over time and getting to know yourself better. So let's take one, what time are we at? Okay. What in your life have you done that makes you most proud? Some people shout out some stuff.
College.
College?
Yeah.
Okay. What about that makes you proud?
Being able to get into college and do well throughout.
Being able to get into college and do well throughout. That makes you proud. Other things that make you proud? Yeah.
Graduating debt-free.
Graduating debt-free. That is awesome. Good for you. How did you do it?
Worked my tail off.
What do you mean, worked your tail off? Say more.
40 hours a week, 20 hours of doing networking, interning, whatever I needed to do to make sure that I was in position to get the job that I wanted afterwards. And then utilizing any free moment that I had to take care of what I needed to take care of.
Okay.
If it was, I strategically planned my classes, so I had an hour and a half between each of my classes. So I used that hour and a half that I was on campus anyway to do what I needed to do. And then if I had a shift and I had an hour and a half there, that's when I went grocery shopping.
Nice.
I took care of everything as much as possible.
So you were really planful about the time that you had. Yeah, please. That's amazing. So, and that's where, I'm going to skip this and show it at the end if I can. That's where you need to go next, right? Every great execution has a great plan behind it. And when we think about wellness, it really is about being planful about the activities in your life that you want to focus on. So I sat down and did this. I haven't done it in a while. And this handout is in your stuff. It doesn't have my data in it. This is my data. And I was like, wow, I've got some work to do, right? If I think about all the elements of my life, hanging out with friends, being socially connected, my inner emotional and spiritual life, the house that I live in, my yard, my car, my office, what I do for a living, how I feed my mind, and then lastly, how I take care of my body. I'm doing okay here, right? Like I'm going to boxing on Saturdays with my son for 30 minutes. I get plenty of sleep. I'm getting to the gym 3 times a day. I've gained the freshman 15 in this role, I'll tell you that. But intellectual, my commute's an hour each way, so I listen to podcasts, and I'm constantly searching for new ideas. Adam Grant has a great one on work life. You should listen to it. It's amazing. Environmental, we just redid our house, and so I focus about like 7 hours a week on cleaning. I don't do laundry. I don't really do laundry that much. But I do a lot of like cleaning up and doing the dishes and making sure that the beds are made so that when we wake up in the morning, it feels like it's, a good place. Spiritual, I got work to do, guys. Because all I'm doing here is saying prayers with my boys at night. That's it. That's not good. I got work to do. Emotional, I'm doing okay. I talk to my brother a couple times a week. I play with my kids on the weekend. We go skiing, skating, all sorts of stuff. So I feel like I'm taking care of that. And then social could be better, right? My husband and I go out maybe twice a month, sometimes only once a month, sometimes not at all. And I would like to spend more time with my friends from college and some of the friends I've made in the community. So of the 168 hours I've gotten a week, I am really only able to track about 124. And I'd like to do better than that, right? And I'd like to use that time to balance a little better. So I'd encourage you to fill this out, to think about it, to be intentional about your time. And what is your name? Danielle. Danielle's the poster child for this, right? So think about Danielle, because I think, yeah, it's awesome. Awesome life lesson, as hard as that probably was, right? Yeah. So then I did a little analysis, and I thought, here are the 3 things I'm going to do, right? Because I want to get better. I'm going to join a softball league in the spring with some friends, because then at least I'll get some physical exercise, and I'll go out and do something I love, and smacking a ball is always a good thing, right? I need to get better at yoga. I need to do 10 minutes before bed every night, because that's the spiritual practice that I like to be able to really get me in the right frame of mind. And then I've got to figure out a way to volunteer or get on a board, because giving back always makes me feel better. And so I've got to figure out a way to bake that in, and maybe it's something I could do with my kids that would give them an example of something that would be even better. So that's how I'm thinking about rearranging those priorities or shifting and trying to get rid of the TV time and push it into more productive time. All right, so and a couple last things, right? So then you just have to do stuff. Julie Foudy talked about it. You've heard it multiple times today. You got to say yes. As hard as it is when you're standing at the top of the mountain, you just have to choose to say yes and slide down. You will get some bumps and bruises along the way, but it's going to be so much better, right? I'm going to play this video because I think it's a really interesting example, and he says some nice things that kind of sum up and wrap up, and then I'll wrap up with one slide and take questions. This is a guy named Nigel Marsh who spent had a great corporate career and walked away because he didn't have enough time with his family, did a lot of thinking, has written some books, and does speaking on work-life balance. Can you help me get this going? Oh, hi, Terrence. Terrence, thank you, Terrence. No, we need some volume. No worries. What's that?
Just kind of based off of the choosing to say yes idea. I mean, there's a lot of problems that arise or you hear about women not being able to say no and saying yes to maybe the wrong thing. So how do you balance or figure out what are the right things to say yes to, and you're not necessarily going down the rabbit hole?
Yeah.
And choose the right thing.
What's your name?
Lily.
So Lily asked a great question. You hear a lot about women saying no to too many things and not saying, that they're saying yes too much, right? And how do you figure out how to say yes to some things and not to other things? I think some of it is experience, right? It's getting to the point where you're so overwhelmed because you've said no or yes to so many things that you can't figure that out. It's also not having a North Star. If you have a North Star and you know what your priorities and objectives are on a daily, weekly, yearly basis, and then you say, is this serving that objective or that priority, you can easily say, no, it's not. So I'll give you, for instance, at work, a very small one. I have some big objectives. It is around formalizing the culture, helping the strategy, building the bench. Someone came to me a few weeks ago and said, hey, the name tags, the name tags are not on good cardstock. Can we get better cardstock for orientation? And I was like, doesn't serve me formalizing the culture, building the bench, or activating the strategy. F the cardboard. Sorry, I know you're more senior than me, but please exit stage right. Right? It's just not important. So I think if you have your priorities in front of you, you know what needs to get done, it's easier to say no to the things that don't matter. Right? Okay, go. All right,
and I've spent the 7 years since struggling with studying
it's okay. That's
and
fine.
writing about work-life balance.
Yep.
I have 4 observations I'd like to share with you today.
I'm only going to share 2.
The first is, if society is to make any progress on this issue, we need an honest debate. But the trouble is, so many people talk so much rubbish about work-life balance. All the discussions about flexi time or dress down Fridays or paternity leave only serve to mask the core issue, which is that certain job and career choices are fundamentally incompatible with being meaningfully engaged on a day-to-day basis with a young family. Now, the first step in solving any problem is acknowledging the reality of the situation you're in. And the reality of the society that we're in is there are thousands and thousands of people out there leading lives of quiet, screaming desperation, where they work long, hard hours at jobs they hate to enable them to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like. It's my contention that going to work on a Friday in jeans and t-shirt isn't really getting to the nub of the issue. The second observation I'd like to make is we need to face the truth that governments and corporations aren't going to solve this issue for us. We should stop looking outside. It's up to us as individuals to take control and responsibility for the type of lives that we want to lead. If you don't design your life, someone else will design it for you, and you may just not like their idea of balance.
There you go. All right, ladies, so it's my hope for you that you become intentional about your choices, that you consider all of the dimensions of your life going forward, and that you continuously take time to reflect and learn and grow and become more self-aware. So good luck on your journeys, and thank you for listening.